And so with Einstein there, we have the relativity of time and space with the integration of time as a fourth dimension. Now note then that in the perspectival world, what we had was a three-dimensional world, a world where individuals were out in space in a three-dimensional continuum, a dimension that can be mapped out on a Cartesian grid of x, y, z, and that the addition of time as the fourth creates a kind of Jungian mandala, a quaternio. Jung had said this in one of his essays, I forget which one, that with the three dimensions of space, with x, y, and z, or height, depth, and width, time, once we add time in, then we have a fourth dimension, and we have the construction of a perfect quaternio, a mandala, that's similar to the completion of the Trinity, which Gebser dates from the mental consciousness period also, with the completion of the Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, with the assumption of the Virgin Mary as the missing fourth there. The fourth, for Jung, was always, recall, the repressed element. And in the Trinity, we always have to suspect a missing fourth. The missing fourth is always there, bound down in the unconscious. It's suppressed. And so what Gebser is talking about here is the missing fourth that now is beginning to come up and configure this new consciousness structure. At least it's a new sort of pantheon of archetypes, of European archetypes that pattern out the episteme, as it were, of Euro-modern high culture that begins to happen here. So we have the construction of this mandalic image of time with Einstein. And with Einstein, time also begins to become a slippery thing, because time moves more slowly in a gravitational field, this is general relativity now, in a gravitational field than it does outside the mass, away from the mass of a planet or a star. Clocks in outer space move faster than clocks down on the ground, and clocks that are moving toward the speed of light also are slowing down. So time there becomes a function both of mass on the one hand, which curves and bends and warps the space around it, around heavy planetary or stellar objects, and on the other hand it becomes a function of speed. Mass and speed actually change time, and it becomes something that's much more fluid and changeable. But for Gebser, this irruption of time into European consciousness is with Einstein basically the same thing as with Picasso, where time in his artwork is being taken up as a fourth dimension, so that the perspectival consciousness structure, which sliced out the world according to this or that sector or point of view, now has to take all those points of view in common and integrate them and put them together into a single iconic image that has now integrated time. So we have Picasso and Cubism as the equivalent of Jung and Freud and Einstein, and he'll go all through the book showing how the irruption of time, the concern with time now that begins to come into European consciousness with modernism, is a new thing. And he is right about this. I think that it really is a new thing, and it does characterize modernity in a way that's very different from the perspectival world. Then he concludes the chapter by talking about the awakening consciousness of the whole, of integrity, or the whole. And he says that along with this realization of the temporal dimension will come also a return back to the whole of the archaic consciousness structure, the ever-present origin, which is pre-timeless. It's not in time. It precedes time. It's always there, always present, always capable of a new inceptual mutation of consciousness. So the ever-present origin is there, but it returns as the total. The all now becomes the whole in the integral, in such a way that the other consciousness structures have been integrated along with the archaic, so that all the consciousness structures are now at the disposal of European man, so that he exists in a space-free, time-free world. So we had seen that with the archaic consciousness structure, space and time, it is space-free, or pre-temporal rather, and pre-spatial, and with the magical consciousness structure, the human being exists in a spaceless, timeless world. With the mythical consciousness structure, it's still spaceless, still undifferentiated, but has temporistic, cyclical time. And with the mental consciousness structure, we have three-dimensional space, the disintegration of the old collective macrospheres that organize civilization, three-dimensional space, but time is the suppressed element that with the integral consciousness structure begins to come in physics first and begins to be taken up and integrated into a whole. So it's almost as though Europe is achieving its omega point here and coming to the end of the completion of its world picture. It's creating a sort of final mandala, perhaps, in modernism that it's going to bequeath to future generations of civilizations in perhaps a way that is similar to the way we study Ptolemy or Galen as the compositors and inheritors of the final world picture that was constructed as the omega point at the end of the classical civilization. And so really by the integral consciousness structure, what he's talking about here is the West's achieving of the completion of its world picture as a kind of omega point. And he does say that Chardin, Teilhard de Chardin, who also speaks of this omega point, that his ideas are equivalent in many respects to the aperspectival integral consciousness structure, as is also Sri Aurobindo, unique amongst the Hindus because most of Gebser's comments about the Hindus are disparaging, and he sees them as a regression to the magical and mythical consciousness structures, but not Aurobindo. He sees Aurobindo's idea of the supramental as coming out of a reformed Hindu tradition and is something very different than traditional Indian thinking. So those are the two equivalents, along with Zen Buddhism, that he sees as structural equivalents to the integral, the concretion of the spiritual, making it concrete through cultural forms, cultural icons. So that's how Gebser sets up his discussion then for this book. And in the next chapter we'll look at the new mutation in a little more detail.